Let's go.
Welcome to the EdjSports Coach Ranking Show. I'm your host, Katie George. Be sure to follow EdjSports on all social media platforms. That's EdjSports. You can find the links below. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to give us a like and subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can get all of our coach rankings and betting content. Joining me each week is Ian O'Connor, Senior Data Analyst at EdjSports. Ian, I imagine you got some rest because the games this weekend were pretty boring.
Yeah, the early slate was pretty boring. I was not really too thrilled. Everything seemed to be pretty one-sided. There was, the Cleveland game came down to the wire, ended up being a good one, and then pretty slow until that 7 o'clock window, I think. Red zone was going back and forth between the two overtime games at once, so It got exciting. But yeah, most of the day was pretty relaxing, so that's nice.
I'm glad to hear it. Again, be sure to like this video and subscribe and follow EdjSports on Twitter to join in on the conversation each week regarding our coach rankings. And this week, not a whole lot of movement, especially in the top 5 of our coach rankings. They all remain exactly the same, with Staley at the top of the list. Sounds like these coaches had pretty good weeks.
A little bit of both, yes and no. Staley and LaFleur had really good weeks. They were big favorites, so it was really hard for them to have decisions that were gonna matter a lot because they were pretty high in win probability. LaFleur, with Green Bay getting down early and being close there for a while, actually did have some tests and made their good decisions, or the right decisions when it mattered. Okay. Later on, he did have a couple errors, but they were already up 11 points, so it really wasn't that big of a deal. Kingsbury was good on fourth downs, which keeps him from dropping because Arizona dropped quite a few spots in EPI after the loss on Monday night. And then Frank Reich and the Colts were on bye, so really nothing there. He just kind of stayed the same. No one jumped him. No one fell below him. Okay. And then Sean McDermott had a couple good goes, but made a couple errors as well. They're ones that won't really impact the data because they were pretty low in win probability at that point. And the other, they were just pretty low. I mean, that's really kind of all there was to it before that comeback. And then they had some decisions later on. But yeah, top 5, all the same, so really not much going on there.
What about some of the coaches outside of the top 5? Was there anything that stood out from the weekend action?
Yeah, Dan Campbell jumps up again this week. He moved up 7 spots last week. This week he's up 4 more spots to 18th overall.
All right.
He went from 20th to 6th in CCI last week, goes from 6th to 4th this week, so moves up a couple more spots there with more good fourth down decisions. They're still last in EPI. They've got the one win. They've really struggled. But Campbell's doing what he can to keep them in the game. They did finally convert some fourth downs on this one. They got blown out by Denver, kind of overmatched there. That Denver team's been playing pretty well lately. And then another one's Kyle Shanahan. He chose to kick on a couple of 4th and shorts. There was a 4th and 2 on the Cincy 15 early. He took a 3-0 lead, went ahead and just took the points there, as they say. And then a 4th and 2 on his own 37 late. Ended up being the second worst call of the week. 4th and 2 on his own 37. They were up 7, gave Cincinnati the ball back instead of going for it to try and get a first down and run out the clock. Cincinnati went down. That LSU connection between Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase connected again to tie the game. So Shanahan moves down 4 spots overall to 12th. He's down 5 spots to 22nd in CCI. So overall, not too horrible. Falls out of the top 10. But CCI, he's really struggling. They're still top 10 in that EPI number, but the conservative play calling could really hurt them down the stretch in the playoff run or in the playoffs when they meet a team with a coach that's going to be aggressive and take advantage of their opportunities.
Those 2 coaches not going to be participants in the hot seat tracker. The last few weeks, we've discussed coaches who are not so highly regarded by their current teams on Hot Seat Tracker. This is where we evaluate decisions made by a head coach who is in the news or rumored to be on the verge of being let go by their current team. Unlike Matt Nagy and Mike Zimmer, who have been in their positions for multiple years, Urban Meyer might be a one-and-done situation with the Jacksonville Jaguars. His tenure has been a disaster, to say the least, I think is fair. Even when landing what is considered a generational talent in quarterback Trevor Lawrence, Meyer has only been able to win twice in 14 weeks, which is obviously pretty brutal. And as early as training camp, Ian, there were reports surfacing that there was a disconnect in the locker room among veterans. Then combining the losing with the video that surfaced on the bye week in Ohio, that was a whole debacle. And even after that national story, he kept his position and continued coaching. This past weekend, the NFL Network were reporting that he called members of the coaching staff losers, which could potentially create an even larger locker room divide. So things are not good, but let's approach things from what we can quantify here at EdjSports. And on our hot seat tracker. Does the data suggest that Urban Meyer has been as bad on the field as he has off of it?
Yeah, it's going to be surprising, and you mentioned it, kind of had some trouble before the season even started, which is never good. But say what you want about those non-game day issues. They're a handful, as you highlighted there. But aside from the fact that he benched James Robinson a couple weeks ago, Trevor Lawrence kind of called him out for that. He's actually been one of the better in-game decision makers when it comes to fourth down decisions. So he's 30th in EPI. The Jaguars are. You mentioned they've got 2 wins. They're one of the bottom teams in the league. But he's 9th in CCI. So that measures, again, fourth down decision making. It's 22nd overall. So a lot of people kind of have called us out on these the last few weeks. And definitely in the beginning, we had the mean tweets. But saying, if Meyer is, at 20 or 22 and there's 10 coaches worse than him, something's wrong.
Sure.
But it's not. We equally weight the EPI and the CCI because the coach does have a hand in how the team performs. You might be in a situation like Dan Campbell or even Urban Meyer where you could be a good coach, not necessarily saying either one of them are. We don't really know yet.
You don't have a great roster.
Exactly, your roster. So you can scheme and all you want, but if your roster is just not as good as you're going up against the Chiefs, there's only so much you can do there. But really no bad late fourth down errors. He's only got 2 errors over 3%, which is that threshold we kind of used and talked about earlier in the season. That's a little bit kind of misleading sometimes, though, because with a team like the Jaguars, they're going to be pretty low in win probability from the start because they're big underdogs. So to get errors over 3% is tough, but he doesn't have many in that 2 to 3% range. The biggest is minus 3.6. And mainly the reason there is just because they're not in games very often. So it's really hard to gain or lose when you don't have much to lose. And it's going to take a lot to get in it. But he's also made the right call very often. He's got 5 decisions over 3%. One of them came against Buffalo in that upset a few weeks ago. The other one was against Miami, which was their first win of the season over in London. So he's been a lot better than people think when you just look at his fourth down decision making. Obviously, we're not going to call for someone to retain their job just because of that when you've got all this other stuff going on that he does. But as far as the things that we can quantify, he's done a really good job so far.
So he's good at situational football, in-game decisions, but obviously everything that comes with him off the field might be his demise. Jags GM Shad Khan said, no move is imminent right now. However, according to Bet Online Sportsbook, Urban Meyer is a plus 175 odd to be the first coach fired, only behind Matt Nagy.
Yep. And that's interesting. You mentioned Matt Nagy being the favorite to be the first coach fired. There could be some history because Chicago has never fired a coach mid-season. So the market is either thinking it's going to be the first time, or all of these coaches that are on the hot seat are going to make it to the end of the season, and then Matt Nagy's going to be fired first. Sure. So it's kind of interesting there.
Yeah, we'll definitely keep an eye on it as well. But in the same bucket, let's quickly discuss David Culley as another potential one-and-done coaching candidate.
Yeah, David Culley is in a really tough situation. You've got the whole, basically the franchise, just a very dysfunctional, there's been a lot said about just their chain of command, just everything that's going on there from top to bottom. So he's thrown in a situation where he doesn't have a quarterback. Deshaun Watson's out due to his legal matters. Just the roster just isn't very good. So it's kind of a lose-lose situation for him coming into this season. Houston is 31st in EPI, so only second to last. He's 20th in CCI. That's good for 30th overall. He hasn't really done anything very good or very bad. Same with Jacksonville. They haven't been in a lot of games, haven't really had those high leverage opportunities late where he's faced with a 4th and 1 or 4th and 2 near midfield with a lead or down, a little bit where he makes the decision to go for it. Everyone's like, wow, what a great call. But one decision over 3% came in the upset over Tennessee just a few weeks ago. But 6 of his top 10 errors have come since week 11. And those were in games against Tennessee, the Jets, and Seattle. They lost that game to the Jets. The Tennessee one they won, and then they just lost to Seattle. All were close games, whereas an underdog, you've got to be aggressive, just like Dan Campbell has been. He's kind of in that same situation where the roster just isn't very good, but he at least puts them in positions where they can keep the ball and try and win the games. David Culley, it's kind of hard really to tell. Like with him more than anyone else, Jacksonville just had the season a few years ago where they made it to the AFC Championship. The Texans have been in the playoffs, but the last few years have just been horrible. So he just came into a bad situation. Would like to see him get a little more time. I think the last coach we had that was one and done was Steve Wilkes in Arizona. If I got that name right, out in like 2017 or 2018. So it's been a few years, but not unheard of. So we'll see.
Some would call that a dumpster fire.
Absolutely.
He's decided to challenge his play. He has tossed down the red flag.
All right, Ian, it's time that we throw our challenge flags. This is where we pick a coaching error from the previous week and we throw the flag challenging his said decision. We'll explain why it was a bad call in terms of win probability maximization. Who are you throwing the challenge flag on this week?
I hate to throw this one. I've got a couple good friends that are Bengals fans that like Zach Taylor, but it's going to be Zach Taylor. Talked about Shanahan already, had the 4th and short kicks in that game. It was a close game. Zach Taylor was on the other sideline, really wasn't any better. He had the most win probability lost in Week 14 out of any team. He had 2 4th and short field goals. One was 4th and 1 on the San Francisco 19 to tie the game early. The other was a 4th and 2, I believe, on the San Francisco 15. Also kicked a field goal there. Had a 4th and short punt. Came out of halftime. I think they ran the ball 3 times. Had 4th and 1 at their own 34. You're in your own territory, but they were down, I think, 11 at that point coming out of halftime. And chose to punt there. Ended up having our 3rd worst error of the week as well, which came in overtime. Was a 4th and medium, the field goal that gave them the lead before San Francisco went down to win the game. It's a little bit of a controversial call. We covered that in our podcast earlier in the stream that I did with Aaron from Football Outsiders on Monday. But yeah, just a lot of really bad calls. He was good early in the season. He had a 4th and 1 on his own 30 against the Vikings in Week 1. Went for it, didn't get it. They were up 14. Minnesota went down, actually scored a touchdown on a 4th down of their own.
Okay.
Minnesota ended up tying that game, going to overtime. Cincinnati won, but the fans were calling, not really calling for his head. It was Week 1, but we're very upset that he was too aggressive in that situation. But we actually agreed with that call. He had a 4th and 1 as well around midfield against Detroit about midway through the season. They ended up scoring a touchdown on that. So he's been really good. It's just these last few weeks, really last half of the season, he's really kind of become a little bit more conservative, and it's kind of cost him a couple times. So they lost their playoff spot this week. Cost them the playoff spot. They're a little bit outside, but it seems like everyone in the NFL is pretty much in play for the playoffs right now. But just like Shanahan, we'll see if that comes back to bite them later on as they're fighting for a playoff spot.
He's been hanging out with Bill a little bit.
Yeah, I think so.
As of late. I am going to throw my challenge flag on Sean McDermott from the other overtime game. And it just felt like a no rhyme, no reason kind of situation for his decisions in this game. Buffalo was down big. They ran a fake punt on 4th and 2 from their own 45. They were down by 21 early in the third quarter. We agreed with the call to go for it, but why send out your punt team and fake it? Just leave the ball in Josh Allen's hands. Then you fast forward, they're down 14 near the end of the third quarter, and Buffalo punts on 4th and 3 from their own 45. So it's the identical play, and yet they've decided to do different things. There was no rhyme or reason to it, and it wasn't aggressive late in the third quarter. So I'm throwing my challenge flag on you, Sir McDermott.
I agree. A lot of people were calling him out on that too. Like social media, the whole game, even Bills writers, reporters all over the place, because like you said, you're in the same situation almost.
Also in the same quarter,
right?
By the way, so it's not like we have bad memory and you did it in the first quarter and then we changed your mind on what to do in quarter 3. I mean, it was literally the same quarter. It's just the same exact. Anyways, mind-boggling, but challenge flags. We're not all, did that hurt your ears? We're not all about the bad here. We like to give credit when credit's deserved. So let's give out our Gold Whistle Awards of Week 14. Gold Whistle goes to coaches that made a great call during the week. These are typically under-the-radar decisions that miss our top 5 but still deserve conversation.
Yeah, this week was a little tough. We mentioned at the top there were a lot of blowouts, not really a lot of opportunities. Not really a lot of opportunities for coaches to make those really good calls or really bad calls. Well, really bad calls because we had coaches make a lot of bad calls. But this one I'm going to go with 2 coaches, Matt Rule and John Harbaugh. So both of them, this is a kind of an analytics nerd kind of thing that people are still coming around to, I think. Okay. They scored a touchdown to go down to get to a 9-point deficit, chose to go for 2. So Dallas did this last year actually in the game, their comeback against Atlanta. They didn't get it, but they knew, hey, we need a touchdown, extra point, and a field goal to win. Whereas if you kick the extra point, you're down 8. Late in the game, if you're trying to score, you want to score and try and tie the game, but don't leave the other team time to go down and get a field goal to win. So if you do that and you don't get the 2-point conversion, the game's over. They know if we don't get it here, we know we have time. We know that we need 2 scores. You're going to play a lot differently. So Baltimore was down 24-15, chose to go for 2, didn't get it, but they knew that. I think there was about 8.5 minutes left in the game. And they ended up getting the touchdown. We actually disagreed with that 4th down later on. We thought they should have kicked the field goal first, but they converted, got the touchdown, recovered the onside kick, and had a chance to win with the field goal. Whereas if they would have only needed 8 points, they might have run the clock down a little bit more, tried to score with very little time left. And then Carolina had a very similar situation. It was 29-20, I believe, when they scored, and they lined up to go for 2. There was a false start, ended up not being able to. Well, they still could have, but chose not to. Again, that was a very small error at that point because they're 5 yards back. But both coaches made the right decision. That's kind of a math nerd kind of thing, I guess. Still trying to get people to buy into it, but Harbaugh, we know, buys into the analytics, and Matt Rule is kind of hit or miss, hasn't been great, but this week he was right on it.
If you're going to be a nerd, I'm going to be a brute. Mine's much simpler. I'm giving my gold whistle to Dan Campbell for purely being aggressive with not the greatest roster in the NFL.
The brawn, not the brains.
Yes, that is certain. That's a very good way to describe him. It was 4th down. They went for it at midfield in quarter 2. Then he went for it in his own territory on 3 different occasions in the 3rd quarter and then on the first play of the 4th. Converted on 2 of the 3. And despite losing, he was aggressive. And I respect that very much. That's why Dan Campbell gets my gold whistle this week.
Like we always say, too, it's about the process, not the results. You know, you have people say, oh, they didn't get it, so it was the wrong call. They got it, so it was the right call. No, Dan Campbell plays it about the process, taking a book from the 76ers and trusting the process there. So.
Lastly, let's pick our Week 15 head-to-head coaching matchups. And as always, it doesn't have to do with storylines or on-field performances, but rather what we're most interested to see from the sidelines, the head coaches going head-to-head. Who are you most looking forward to watching?
Yeah, no storyline for me this week other than these 2 coaches are both the hot seat coaches that we cover. So the hot seat bowl here, Jacksonville hosts Houston. Works out perfectly that we covered these 2 coaches. Did not know that they were playing, hadn't looked ahead to the schedule yet. Okay. But we did cover both of them. It's not really an enticing matchup on the field. Jacksonville 30th in EPI, Houston 31st, 2 of the bottom 3 teams. But Urban Meyer, we mentioned 9th in CCI. David Culley is 20th. What expects to be a close game between 2 teams that are just not very good will likely come down to a big 4th down decision late that could decide this game. So the money would be on Urban Meyer to make the right call based on this season. Would say history, but this is all we've got. They're both first-year coaches, so we will see. How about you?
I appreciate that you're interested in that. I am, on the other hand, not. I am most interested in the big AFC matchup between the Pats and the Colts. While Brady and Manning are, of course, gone, I still think it's going to be an awesome game because Belichick did a masterful job in last week's game against the Bills in incredible weather conditions, by the way. He is 30th in our CCI metrics. He's been very conservative, as we know, on 4th downs, which could have to do with his rookie QB. Right. Frank Reich, on the other hand, is among our top 5 in coach rankings and is 3rd in CCI. So you've got the 3rd best decision maker versus the 3rd worst decision maker. It could very well come down to a 4th down call or late call in the game. So I think that'll be a great one.
Should be 2 close ones, like you said. One not fun to watch and one that should be fun to watch.
All right, that does it for another Coach Ranking show. Thank you for your time. Follow Edge Sports on all social media platforms. That's EDJ on all social media platforms. You can also like and subscribe to this YouTube channel for our Coach Rankings each week, as well as betting content. Thanks for your time.